Received a video about the wife as heated. As the trainer her, I sold the business for $12 million and left the country. Until the kids graduated from high school, Linda was allowed to remain in our home, and I was left to pay the mortgage and the utilities bills. Plus, I was stuck paying for her automobile, and she ended up with half of my company's worth. She managed to get her hands on 65% of our wealth, which includes our savings, investments, and retirement accounts. In addition to obtaining primary custody, she granted me ordinary visitation rights, which meant that I could see the kids every other weekend, and for 3 weeks in a row during the summer. The amount of child support was determined to be $1,600 per month, with $800 each kid. Her monthly maintenance award was $2,200, as she hadn't worked in the past 6 years. If I did not withdraw the petition, the divorce would be completed in 120 days. With a clap of her gavel, Judge Patricia Thompson rose to her feet. I felt compelled to do it. A single phrase I said altered the trajectory of my life for the better part of a few months. I offered to describe it for her if she needed help since I was confused and didn't know what was so difficult to grasp. In the midst of her movement, Judge Thompson halted, her head jerking toward me at a rate that made me fear her neck may crack. She gave me that look as if I'd just done the worst thing imaginable. She sat back down slowly, her expression changing from amazement to fury. Her intense stare might have chilled the sun. It was a gross understatement to say she was furious. She asserted her intelligence and knowledge of what was to come. Nothing bothered her. I had 1 minute to apologize before she could consider me in contempt of court. The next minutes were all prearranged. In response, I expressed my complete disdain for the circumstance by saying that she would have accomplished something that day. In a desperate attempt to find a tranquilizer, my lawyer hastily searched his briefcase and shouted at me to stop talking. She smirked, smashed her gavel once again, and threatened to test my level of disrespect after 45 days behind bars. As a sarcastic aside, I proposed 90 days and politely inquired as to whether she would be interested in considering an extension. Perhaps she wouldn't be so annoying if she had a little more freedom from time to time, I even said. I advised her to use them to get to the end of it and maybe be less of a nightmare as I raised both middle fingers. I don't think anybody in history has ever needed a change as she did. After giving it some thought, I came to the conclusion that someone could have called 911. I was worried that she was about to have a stroke or that her brain was about to burst. Her cheeks became a frightening shade of crimson, but surprisingly, there was no smoke coming out of her ears. My reaction made her furious, and I got 120 days in prison. The bailiffs grabbed a hold of me, and her voice sounded diabolical. The whole courtroom was taken aback, and my lawyer seemed completely deflated. I had to consult a psychologist for a few weeks in prison because I couldn't control my laughter. It wasn't shocking to get a letter the following day from my lawyer's office informing me that they were abandoning me as a client. You may be asking why it was necessary. A brief history is provided here. The 33-year-old me is Michael Johnson. A respectable middle-class couple from the Midwest of the United States gave birth to me. A strict moral compass guided my upbringing in a conventional family. You didn't cheat, and respect was gained. A lot was riding on your word. Work hard, share what you have, and be loyal to your convictions. These were the teachings my parents instilled in me. Behave in a way that you would want to be acted upon. People seldom think about the opposite side, which is to treat others the way you want them to treat you. Even though it is the Christian thing to do, I've never been very good at turning the other cheek. I am notoriously obstinate and refuse to let go of grudges. I had a brief romance with Jennifer Adams when we were both in high school. We had a disagreement and ended things, but we both knew it was only temporary. We'd take a break over the weekend and be back to each other by Tuesday. It was unfortunate that on Sunday, I saw my cousin James bringing Jennifer to the cinema. Because we were the same age and spent our childhoods together, James and I were like brothers. Despite his knowledge that we would likely reconcile, he proceeded to ask her out nevertheless. I considered him dead to me at that point. In spite of Jennifer's best efforts on Tuesday, I chose to ignore her. The next Sunday, during church, James came over to me, but I just looked at him. He spoke for a while, and then I left. Not even during our family's Sunday supper did I pay him any mind. I bolted as he attempted to join me in a video game. Despite my parents' best efforts, I would not engage in conversation with him. I refused to communicate with him even after a year had passed since I had stolen his girlfriend. When he challenged me, I even struck him. Years later, he invited me to his wedding, but I chose to disregard it. I issued an invitation to every single one of my extended relatives to attend my wedding to Linda, with the exception of James. Yes, I am aware that it is foolish of me to harbor resentment, but when someone willfully wrongs me, I find it difficult to forgive. James and Jennifer's treachery was not an innocent oversight. To some of you, I may seem like a complete moron right about now. Allow me to irritate you even more if that is so. Dealing with the fallout of your actions is something I think everyone should do. Loss of driving privileges, increased insurance premiums, and mandatory community service are all consequences of a drunk driving conviction. Lose your job if driving is a requirement of your work. An idiotic tax is what I would describe it as. A girl will be dubbed mommy for the next 18 years if she becomes pregnant at the age of 18 without using birth control. It is the guy's job to take charge if he gets his prom girlfriend pregnant. One must accept personal responsibility for the outcomes of their choices. Someone else's faults will not be mine to fix. As a result of my diligent high school work, I was able to get scholarships that allowed me to attend college. My grades remained high, and I had a good time with the women. I maintained a healthy outlook and was always the most attractive person around. I kept in excellent condition and won more battles than I lost, even though I got into more than my share of conflicts due to my convictions. I was beautiful enough to women. I got my bachelor's degree in economics and my master's in business administration after completing a minor in accounting. I was able to get a respectable position with a well-paying employer. Because I was unmarried and had a little money, I decided to try my hand at stock market trading and discovered I was good at it. I think I did okay. At a party a few months into my employment, I met Linda. We were quickly friends. Everything started when I asked her out on a date. I don't say this just because she was my girlfriend. She was stunningly gorgeous. Her presence drew attention wherever we went. When we split up, every single one of my friends said they would attempt to move in with us. Attempts to transform her were even made fun of by my lesbian friends. I finally made the proposal. She said yes, and we tied the knot. Linda did the same thing. Rumor has it that she pursued a Master of Science in Rural Social Work degree. Although she was unsuccessful in her attempt, she was able to get a degree in art history and secure employment as a barista at a nearby coffee shop. For the uninitiated, a woman with an MRS degree is a symbol of a woman who delays femininity by attending college and then returns home with a spouse to support her. I am, in fact, a conceited moron. Amble away. Married life was easy for us. An whole week before to the wedding, Linda left her employment to devote herself entirely to becoming a stay-at-home mother. We purchased a lovely 3-bedroom home, and our sexual lives were wonderful. I had a successful career and was raking in the dough from the stock market. Since we weren't living it up, we managed to save quite a bit. I invested every cent of my bonus and put every dime of my $450,000 to good use. To retire before the age of 45 was my goal. Because I was so good at my job, I was able to climb the corporate ladder and earn large bonuses and promotions. After we were married for a while, I returned home one Saturday to see Linda all dolled up and beaming. Holy cow, did she just say exactly what I thought she said? Daddy, get dressed and showered quickly, because we're going out to celebrate tonight. Even while it wasn't completely unexpected, we had been trying for a few months, it was nonetheless shocking. I turned her around and kissed her all over, thinking that we would have to tone down the festivities due to her pregnancy and the impending arrival of the kid. That night, we were the talk of the town. We were overjoyed for the next months as we were ready to welcome our new family member. A girl was the next surprise. Being a daddy's daughter was something I was looking forward to. Everything was perfect for me. Finally, the day arrived, and we made a beeline for the hospital. A few hours later, our beautiful, healthy baby girl was delivered, complete with all of her digits. She remained in the hospital for a few more days due to her young age, but we were able to take her home without any complications. Both sets of grandparents welcomed us. The mood was light. My mother found herself fixated on her. Having the grandchild she had always desired made her very happy. Our lives were upended. I came to the conclusion that the distance between my family and my job at the large corporation was too much. I started my own business after saving a substantial amount of money. After obtaining the appropriate permits, I launched my own investment business after seeing good returns on my investments. My family and friends were already receiving my assistance, so I approached them about becoming formal customers. That sparked action. Even several of my former coworkers have transferred their portfolios to me. I was able to build a respectable clientele and attract more potential members in only 1 year. There is no way to go down when you are at the top of the globe. Our little girl's third birthday bash was a real showstopper. Even though she wouldn't remember it, we commemorated the occasion and captured footage for her to savor in her later years. Family members from both sides were there. Everything at the party took a turn for the worst when I overheard a talk that stopped everyone from enjoying themselves. The hall bathroom was full, so I went to our bedroom where it was peaceful, to use the restroom. Just as I was ready to leave, I overheard my mom and her sister chatting in the hallway. The origin of the girl's blue eyes was something Mom couldn't have fathomed, she said. She was advised by her sister Samantha to inquire with me about it. Mom said she was afraid I would be devastated if I discovered she wasn't really mine. She was concerned about the impact of the truth on me and how pleased I was. I was unable to continue listening. In silence, I made my way back to the restroom and secured the door. I had to give it some thought, but surely the girl was meant to be mine. We must have shared blue eyes with some distant relative. In contrast to Linda's more hazel eyes, mine were a murky brown. Within my mental representation of my extended family, the lone one devoid of brown eyes was my cousin Hannah, whose non-blood-related father aside contributed to her green eyes. I dawned to remember any blue-eyed relatives of Linda S. I had to gather myself and go back to the celebrations before anybody noticed I was absent for a long. I hid my feelings, seemed to be happy, and went back to the party, where I endured a difficult day and planned my next move. Everything calmed down and everyone departed after a while. I studied the girl's face intently when I put her to bed that night. It felt like none of them resembled me, and some looked like Linda, while others were completely alien. I used a business credit card to conceal the invoice the next day, when I had office supplies delivered while Linda slept with the girl. In the meantime, I looked into private investigation agencies in my area. I couldn't get the feeling that Linda had cheated on me almost 4 years ago. Would it be fair to call her disloyal if she did cheat? I needed evidence. I met with Elite Investigations and hired them a few days after the requested materials arrived. Everything they needed to get into Linda S. laptop, tablet, and mobile phone was given to them by me. Also, at the same time, I did a few things with my money. All of this wouldn't have happened if the girl were mine and she hadn't been cheating. On the other hand, it would protect my funds from her if my suspicions were correct. I would neither condone her adultery or take responsibility for her child's upbringing. Both the girl and I were completely blameless victims. They might shoulder the financial burden if she decided to become pregnant by someone else. It was still early, but I was waiting for confirmation. I got the letter at my workplace 2 weeks after that. I unlocked my door and sobbed for an hour. Realizing she wasn't mine was a crushing blow. I knew it was true, yet I held on to hope nevertheless. After gathering all the necessary evidence, my PI met with me the next day to present it to me. Linda continued to see her personal trainer, a blonde with blue eyes. Twice a week she even brought the girl to his apartment. The audio proved that they knew who the biological father was. A divorce attorney was my first point of contact the next day. I ignored his customary counsel in favor of putting the child's needs first and insisted on getting the paperwork ready to file when the time was right. I surprised Linda after 2 months of planning, during which time I had no assets and no net income. On that particular weekend, my cousin James and his wife Jennifer arrived there. I informed them that a few weeks before, they had visited me at my workplace. They admitted guilt and apologized deeply after we had some serious talks, and I felt it was time to move on. Wow, you all are so naive. The truth is that James and Jennifer did come to see me and express their apologies. I completely agree. They were re-embraced into my life once I really forgiven them, but I could have missed a handful of minor points. No big deal, really. There are people in Jennifer S. family who aren't afraid to break the law sometimes. Some of them are really hefty and aren't afraid to get into a fight every once in a while at the bar. Some have even speculated, unrelated to the subject at hand, that a few could be goons for a shadowy gang of local merchants. However, this is only hearsay. A personal trainer at a nearby gym was robbed after naively attempting to fend off 5 assailants. according to a news report that appeared a few days before to James and Jennifer S. arrival. He sustained many injuries, including a fractured jaw, nose, ribs, arm, kneecap, and testicles. His time in the hospital would be considerable. The town's crime problem needs police attention, but nobody can be found guilty since the assailants hid their identities in dark clothing, gloves, and ski masks. Reconstructive surgery and physical therapy will help the victim, who has blonde hair and blue eyes, get back on her feet, but she may need to avoid close personal contact for a while. After years of legal struggles, he will discover that his vehicle is in a junkyard, that his bank accounts are empty, that his credit cards are maxed up, and that his identity has been stolen. Possibly worried about the increasing crime rate, Linda remained surprisingly depressed for around 1 week after the mugging. I offered to help her feel more secure at home, but she still wasn't satisfied. I gave my lawyer instructions to finish and submit the papers on Wednesday morning so that she could be served on Friday afternoon. I refused to budge, even though he tried to get me to. I was able to study and sign the paperwork by Thursday. We met in his office, and I was able to wrap things up. I figured I'd go along with his warnings and give her the home and assets nonetheless. Having said that, I was very explicit that I would not pay anything more. The mortgage and utilities would be her responsibility if she chose to retain the residence. Importantly, the investment accounts had been empty for more than 30 days. There was no problem with my giving her a perfect score of 0. Over the last few weeks, I had been stealthily removing my equipment and personal belongings from the home and garage, unbeknownst to Linda. James and Jennifer S. Ranch became a temporary home for most of my office equipment and bigger possessions, while a one-bedroom apartment I had discreetly acquired was used for smaller, less expensive goods. The building where this apartment was located was owned by an offshore LLC whose evasive owners made it very difficult to determine their connection to me. The arrival of Friday morning came at last. I went to work as usual, but this time I had a strategy. James had given me a hand relocating my vehicle to my workplace a couple of days before. After leaving my vehicle, I got into the truck and headed directly for the bank. Just $150 remain in our bank accounts after I emptied them all. I took care of emptying our safe deposit box as well. After that, I got in my car and headed to the ranch, where I hid all of my possessions and cash. I was afraid someone may find out where I had hidden my money or trace a wire transfer. What was ahead would need monetary resources. Why should you put your faith in Jennifer and James? Not complicated. The same offshore LLC controlled the mortgage on their property, and James remained family through it all. There are repercussions when you meddle with family. Upon our eventual reconciliation, the remainder of the family took offense. When I got back to my house later that morning, I stopped a little distance away to examine the GPS tracker that Linda had put on her vehicle. True to form, I found her at the mall. I drove into the driveway in a mad dash to get home. I had gathered all of my possessions and clothing in the garage a few days ago and had packed them up. Next, I hurriedly retrieved the remaining garments from the dresser and closet with their hangers and threw the boxes into the vehicle. We were able to put everything onto the vehicle in only a few trips. As I was leaving, I failed to secure the garage door or even the front door. My phone went off. Because her credit cards were denied, it was probably Linda. I chuckled as I quickly peered at the GPS signal, which showed that her automobile was heading in my way. After dropping my phone on the table, I got up and went out the door. I had covered many blocks in the time it took. When I got to my new apartment, I took everything out of the truck and put it all away. I was relaxing in my chair after 3 drinks when my brand new mobile phone started ringing. Linda was not one of the handful who had this particular number. When I picked up the phone, the other person informed me that she had been served. They told me the DVD will be on its way to me shortly. Ending the call with a simple, "Okay, thank you," I hung up. The video showed up in my inbox 15 minutes after that. Linda's disbelief was obvious. She was served and then collapsed on the floor, as shown in the video. After making sure she was okay, the process server departed. I would give everything to see her face when she perused the divorce petition and learned I had video and DNA proof of her infidelity. After then, progress was quite slow. My former workplace contacted me on many occasions to inform me that Linda had attempted to reach me via phone. The rumor that I had quit 2 weeks earlier was not believed by her. She went so far as to show there in person, making such a disturbance that the authorities had to come and remove her from the premises. After James called her a few times, she began to suspect his participation and began pressing him for answers. My old employer and James filed restraining orders against her, so she is now legally obligated to stop harassing us. My attorney tried to get in touch with her 2 weeks later to inquire about her legal representation, but she still hadn't retained one. With just the money in her purse and the $300 remaining in our accounts, she was rapidly running out of money. For help, she turned to her parents. In the meanwhile, I stayed out of her way, not beginning any new tasks and making sure nothing was left behind for her to take. Meetings were set up once she eventually obtained legal representation. I told my lawyer not to give her any more money, so I skipped the meeting and refused to go. Arbitration was the result of the unsuccessful meetings. There were inquiries about the funds throughout the arbitration process. Linda insisted, "Where's all the money, you idiot?" To which I responded, "What money? We are flat broke. I am living in the cheapest one-bedroom apartment I could find, picked for its affordability and my acquaintance with the owner. All investments, checking, and savings disappeared due to a disastrous investment. I thought bitterly about how I had invested in an irreconcilable spouse. It was accurate. Now they couldn't access the money since it was kept by offshore banks. The home would be legally hers when we gave it to her. It was like seeing a storm strike a home and noticing that at least the debris wasn't on fire, while my lawyer pointed out that he could have been more assertive. Thanks to the mortgage being maxed out, I was unable to make the payments. Everything took a turn for the worst once Linda let out a scream. Who pays for the upkeep of kids? Not my child, not my concern. Maintenance for a spouse? Got no work, no money, no way. A quarter of the cash on hand was what she wanted, not a single one. 60% of the company? Hope everything works out. 200% of retirement? Completely gone. We ended ourselves in court before Judge Patricia Thompson, a renowned feminist and man-hating judge, after arbitration failed miserably. Without a doubt, I was sunk. Believe me when I say I could persuade them there was no cash on hand. The court determined my responsibilities using those figures, even though they could look at my accounts. They were unable to get their hands on the money. The process of transferring funds across my several accounts and institutions took some time. To conceal the funds, I exerted considerable effort. In my case, I moved all of the money out of one bank and into many other accounts. These accounts existed under different identities because of a less honorable enterprise in Jennifer S. family, a joke gift store that sold phony identification cards for entertainment purposes only, as stated on the cards. For an additional $70, I got a well-designed ID that purported to be John Smith. The entertainment statement was the sole identifier. They would omit the warning for an additional charge. It was also expensive and time-consuming, but a traceable way to electronically move funds to other accounts. At the 75-day mark of my 120-day county jail term, short-term punishments are served in county jail, not state prison. I found myself back in front of the man-hating judge, who scowled and demanded to know if I had taken the lesson to heart. When she asked me about my attitude in her court, I said, "About not marrying a cheating spouse? I learned that long before your court." She then emphasized that she was talking to my behavior. Concerned for her health and ignoring any criticisms of my demeanor, I attended to the severely throbbing vein on her forehead. In the midst of being railroaded in a kangaroo court, I made the suggestion that her blood pressure should jump whenever she sees the doctor. Given my demeanor, she threatened to add another 45 days to my prison sentence if I did not change my attitude. She proceeded to ask me why I hadn't paid my ex-wife the first 2 installments of child support and maintenance, which brought up the reason for our meeting. Additionally, she wanted to know why my lawyer wasn't there and whether they had left me high and dry. She was angry that I had corrected her sarcastically and indicated that judges were meant to have high IQs. She then thanked me sarcastically. With an air of superiority, she volunteered to break it down for us so that even a 5th grader could get it. At this point, I began to believe that she truly judged me unfairly. I am in jail. I have no access to money. Because I have no access to money, I can send any. Since it was your decision to put me here, I suggested she explain why she was the reason the cheating woman can to get the money she was trying to steal from me. To make sure she was following along, I asked if I should ease off a little. After that, I spent another 120 days behind bars, 45 from my first conviction, 45 from her first tantrum, and 45 more that I accrued towards the conclusion of my term. It wasn't too terrible, I'll admit. I ate it nonetheless, even though it was disgusting. Lots of spare time and a comfortable bed were mine. The weights and other workout tools were very helpful to me. Inside, I had little issues. To begin, my antics in court were well known in the prison, which made me some friends. The second advantage is that Jennifer S. family has some insider contacts. A less bright relative of Linda S. was the source of the lone dissenting opinion. He reasoned that if he were to go to prison for a week for a little infraction, it would serve as a lesson to me. Even before he stepped foot in the prison, everyone inside knew him. Understanding his motives was a piece of cake. Seen from across the yard, he was elbowed in the belly when he was unintentionally hit by a prisoner who was throwing a football. Still determined, he persisted with his mission until a basketball hit him 25 feet away. While he was being brought to his feet, the passer apologized profusely, and then another elbow landed on his chin. He got back on his feet and continued walking toward me after shaking off the occurrences. He attempted a sucker punch while I was turned away, but I was not oblivious. It was a 70-yard field goal waiting to happen, so I dove around and kicked him in the crotch with all my might. He ended up in the hospital due to his string of unfortunate events. He continued to spend the most of his time in his cell until his release, refusing yard exercise 2 days later. She brought me back to court and asked whether I was prepared to apologize before turning to the judge. For what? I inquired, and she went on to detail my disgusting outburst in courts. I said, I really don't know what you're talking about. She shot me down and told me to be courteous or else I'd be in for a long stay. I vented my frustration, saying that she was getting under my skin and that another judge may step in. In a caustic manner, I implied that I could begin to stamp my feet and that if she were to have a stroke in court, an ambulance would be required. It had not been paid in accordance with the order for child support, maintenance, mortgage, or utilities, as I had pointed out. I made it clear that the children were not mine, that I would be unable to work or pay anything while in prison. My ex-wife was a cheat, I said, and she ought to die, or at least be charged with a crime for her actions. I said that I had given her half of the company, so she should have plenty of money, which brought up another concern. They were unable to seize Linda S.'s share of the company, as Linda S.'s attorney interrupted to clarify. They hadn't identified the true owners when Mr. Johnson sold his business to an international firm 3 months before, till he filed for divorce. A beautiful lady suddenly stepped up and introduced herself as a board member from the company that had bought the company. She sought to vacate the decision that had granted Mrs. Johnson any ownership stake in her ex-husband's firm. The acquisition had occurred before the divorce, she said, making it improper to grant ownership without the company's participation. This business was unrelated to the matter at hand, and they denied Mrs. Johnson's ownership claim. The proceeds from the transaction became the subject of some inquiry. The young lady clarified that all financial dealings and ownership transfers had place in other countries. I am not privy to that information, but my understanding is that the money from the purchase never entered U.S. territory, making it not subject to U.S. laws. Any claim on that money needs to be addressed with your ex-husband, possibly in the country where the money is located. Linda S. attorney continued, "Which country is that?" The female respondent said, "The initial transfer was to Switzerland, but it was moved shortly after. I don't know where it went after that." As his desperation level rose, my ex-lawyer brought up the fact that the home was on the verge of foreclosure due to 5 months of unpaid mortgage and impending utility cuts. He brought up the fact that Linda S.'s parents had pitched in at first, but that they were eventually overwhelmed. Linda managed to get a job as a server at a neighborhood restaurant, but her wages weren't enough to cover her expenses. I had 1 week to pay off all the past due payments, the judge told me as he turned to face me. I joked that she should teach me how to make money appear out of nowhere. I informed her that I was incarcerated and unable to work or access monies. Under the circumstances, expecting me to make payments was ridiculous. I brought up the fact that I was unable to afford legal representation and raised doubts about the veracity of the enigmatic stories they said I was concealing. There may have been such accounts, but I lacked the credentials to access them. Anyone may dispute the supposed funds from our bank, savings, and investment accounts if they can offer proof of these purported accounts. I detailed how, after some disastrous investments in the past, my business was in a terrible place, and I had to sell it at a loss just to pay the bills. Recognizing the court's doubt, I just shrugged, without caring whether they believed me or not. I implied that my ex-wife may have pilfered the funds when she was having an affair with one of her men. My complaint was rejected by her lawyer, who said that it was not reasonable. I said, "It makes as much sense as keeping me in jail without access to money and demanding I make payments." After I refused to pay, the court threatened to put me in prison indefinitely. I just looked at her in disbelief and said, with a hint of sarcasm, that it was smart of them to keep me in a position where I couldn't satisfy their requests, even if they insisted I do. After Linda failed to make her mortgage payment for 4 months, the home was foreclosed upon, and she was evicted from her Lexus. Because renting was out of her price range, she returned to living with her parents and began working 30 hours a week at the cafe. Hurriedly, they pleaded I was hoping the court would let me go free so I could get my payments going. At the same time, her partner, who had just left the hospital and was beginning physical rehabilitation, was having trouble getting out of his financial jam. No new credit card accounts could be established in his name due to his terrible credit rating. It took him a long time to pay off his debts since he had poor auto insurance and had to work part-time at the gym to pay for expensive medical expenses and deductibles. I was able to get a lawyer and negotiate a release with the court so that I could get a job and begin paying payments. Suspicion of concealed finances and flight risk forced me to submit my passport. After moving in with James and Jennifer to their ranch, I got a job at a fast food joint. Even though I was aware that someone was watching me, I had already stashed away most of the money. Linda was granted a court order to garnish my minimal pay for the subsequent 4 months, but she received very little in return. During this time, James and I worked out the details of our plans. He packed up my residence and gave my possessions to my relatives while I was behind bars. In order to evade observation, packages were dispatched to a central location. Guests quietly relocated items during get-togethers with relatives and cookouts. I stayed home or worked all day to avoid going out. Due to Linda's persistent disruptive behavior, the fast food joint was able to get a restraining order against her. I was able to secure my employment by making a covert payment to the management. I began to get visits at the ranch from my lawyer, who had first represented the new owners of my previous firm. I ended up employing her as my legal counsel. During our meetups by the pool, she was very aggressive. I made a joke about how attorneys handle their values as if they were cash and disregard any ethical issues about our lawyer-client relationship. "Are you interested in my financial situation?" I did, in fact, sell my company. "Nope. I certainly didn't buy it for myself. I had every intention of denying Linda any share in the company I was selling. I kept the money out of Linda's hands by selling it abroad, where it is not subject to U.S. law. Because of the judgments against me, if I were to deposit any of it in a U.S. bank, it would be vulnerable to her claims. That just wasn't going to work. Along with my investment accounts, the total was close to $12 million, so it was a considerable figure. Approximately $250,000 was stashed away in different places, including safes, bank accounts, and deposit boxes. I still had roughly $200,000 on hand after deducting some of this money for my goals. I plotted my last move, well aware that I would not be keeping the money. We had a large cookout for the extended family on a bright Wednesday afternoon. A spectacular party was about to take place. I assisted James with the smoker and grill while my lawyer Lisa spoke with the visitors. An uncle of Jennifer S. came up to me later in the day to thank me for getting back to the family and helping out James and Jennifer. He gave me an envelope and we had a little conversation. I gave it to Lisa to keep secret. I made a big announcement later that night. The ranch's lien holder had verified that the mortgage had been paid in full, and James and Jennifer were the proud new owners of the property. An outburst of joy was set off by the news. We continued to party well into the night. Guests began to go when Lisa, who was traveling with 6 others, said that she had an early departure the next morning. She took off from an airport in the next state. She came for the party in her rented vehicle, having already packed and prepared everything. She skipped going back to her leased flat and went directly to the airport. As they strolled to the international airport, nobody paid attention to the guy clambering out of her vehicle in the parking garage, or the man strolling leisurely 60 feet behind her. In contrast to Timothy Walker, whose passport did not generate any suspicion, Michael Johnson was unable to leave the country, as he had given it up to the court. As the pair embraced on their way to Toronto on a first-class aircraft, not a single person even batted an eye. At that point, Lisa White vanished, and Timothy Walker and Emma Walker boarded their connecting trip to Ecuador without her. Chris and Anna Johnson reached their new hacienda on Belize's Caribbean coast 2 days after they left. Somewhere along the line, they joined the Mile High Club. There, in an odd place, was a weathered Chevy truck that looked just like the one that had gone missing from James and Jennifer S. property. The bench warrant for Michael Johnson was issued 2 weeks subsequent to the BBQ. For failing to show up or make contact, he was let go 2 days after the cookout. James and Jennifer went to court since he had not paid his ex-wife since then. A lawyer dressed sharply said that the couple should not be held liable for their cousin S' whereabouts after she hired a room and then vanished. They went so far as to sue him for rent arrears. The only thing they knew was that he disappeared one afternoon after getting in his old pickup truck. Even though doubts were rampant, evidence did not disprove their account. Tom Anderson oversaw a little charter fishing operation for a number of years, while Emma oversaw the running of their quaint seashore cantina. They made the most of their opulent home on one of the bigger haciendas and flourished in the sleepy little town. Periodically, guests such as Jennifer, James, and other relatives would drop by. Chris and Anna, who were madly in love, had a basic but wonderful existence. The cantina, or their opulent hacienda, was the venue of choice for social gatherings on most nights. They were welcomed into the society with open arms and a considerable amount of money. They were always quite kind when asked for donations. Whenever Chris wasn't tea on the water or at the cantina, he would try his hand at stock market trading. He would even assist people manage their money by opening accounts for them. A surprising turn of events befell Judge Patricia Thompson. A few years subsequent to my departure to Belize, her notoriously sexist wife was discovered in the midst of an affair. After marrying, the judge took in her wife's 3 kids as his own. After Judge Thompson and her ex-wife divorced, the court ordered her to pay alimony, child support, and mortgage payments. She was already in a terrible position when her ex-wife publicly continued their affair by moving her lover into the home. They acted much like any other couple, even though they weren't legally married. Their wedding was supposed to take place 1 week after their youngest child's college graduation, which happened to coincide with Judge Thompson's financial commitments ending. Thus rumors started circulating about it.